Right, you've got 100 grand sitting there. Don't blow it on a jet ski, not yet anyway, because that 100 grand is about to become a battleground. Property versus shares, Australia's oldest wealth argument, fighting it out for your cash. And here's the bit that changes everything. A tax rule quietly rewired back in May this year just flipped who actually wins. If your uncle at Christmas lunch is still repeating the old advice, he's out of date. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which move wins for someone on your income right now. This isn't about picking a team and staying loyal forever. It's about knowing, cold, which lever actually moves the needle for your 100 grand. Leverage, tax, or just plain discipline. By the end, you'll know whether the property crowd or the shares crowd has the better argument for someone on your income, and whether the new tax rules just changed your answer. Before we start scoring rounds, here's the one rule that makes Australia weird in a good way. When an Aussie company pays you a dividend, it's already paid tax on that profit, up to 30 cents in every dollar, because the standard company tax rate here is 30%. Most countries just tax you again on top of that. Not here. Australia hands you a credit for the tax the company already paid. It's called franking, and if you've never heard of it, you're not alone. Most people don't discover it exists until their first tax return comes back bigger than they expected. It's real, it's legal, and it's going to matter a lot in about 10 minutes. Keep that number in your back pocket, 30 cents in the dollar. Round 1. Leverage. This is property's home turf, and it's not close. Walk into a bank with your 100 grand as a 20% deposit, and at a standard 80% loan, they'll hand you enough to buy a $500,000 property. Get lender's mortgage insurance involved, push your deposit down to as little as 10%, and suddenly that same 100 grand is buying you up to $1 million of real estate. $1 million from 100 grand. Now try that with shares. Walk into the same bank and ask them to lend you $400,000 against a parcel of ETFs. They'll politely show you the door. Margin lending does exist for shares, but it caps out way lower, somewhere around 50 to 70% of the share value. And if the market drops, you get a margin call, which is the finance world's polite way of saying, pay up right now or we sell your stuff. Property doesn't do that to you overnight. So your 100 grand buys you exactly 100 grand of direct share exposure. With property, that same 100 grand can buy you 5 to 10 times that in leveraged real estate. That's a genuine structural advantage, and no amount of enthusiasm about index funds changes it. Now, borrowing's not free right now. The Reserve Bank's cash rate sits at 4.35% as we speak, after 3 hikes already this year. That makes leverage more expensive on both sides. But expensive leverage still beats no leverage. Round 1. Property. Clean sweep. Round 2. Costs and liquidity. And this is where property's shine wears off fast. Say you're buying an investment property somewhere in that $500,000 to $800,000 range in New South Wales. Before you've even got the keys, stamp duty alone is taking somewhere between $18,400 and $31,900 out of your pocket. That's before you've paid a cent of actual mortgage. Then it keeps going. Property management fees eating 5 to 10% of your rent every month. Repairs and maintenance chewing through roughly 1 to 1.5% of the property's value every year. Council rates, landlord insurance, and if the place sits empty for a few weeks between tenants, that's real money gone too. Now compare that to shares. A single trade on the ASX can cost you about $10 in brokerage. $10. And if you're in a low-cost index fund tracking the ASX 200, you might be paying somewhere between 4 and 10 basis points a year in fees. We're talking cents, not thousands. Then there's liquidity. Decide you want out of your shares on a Tuesday, and you can have the cash in your account within days. Decide you want out of your investment property, and you're looking at weeks, sometimes months, plus roughly 2 to 2.5% in agent's commission just to get someone else to buy it. Here's the number that stings most. The national rental yield right now is sitting at just 3.45 to 3.6%. The ASX 200, meanwhile, has delivered around 9.35% a year over the past decade, including dividends. And once you add franking credits back in, that climbs to 10.6%. Round 2, and it's not close. Shares. If that rental yield number just made you wince a little, drop the word yield in the comments. That tells me you're exactly the kind of person who checks the numbers before buying. And there's a lot more of that coming. Round 3. Tax. And this one used to be simple. Not anymore. Here's how it worked, and still partly works. Negative gearing lets a property investor take a loss on their rental when the costs are bigger than the rent coming in, and use that loss to reduce their taxable income. It's most valuable if you're on the top marginal rate, which for this financial year is 45%, plus the 2% Medicare levy, so 47% combined. On the shares side, remember that franking credit we talked about earlier? Up to 30 cents in the dollar, you're back on fully franked dividends. That one's untouched by anything I'm about to tell you. But here's the bit nobody's fully caught up on yet. In the May 2026 federal budget, and this is now law, not a rumor, the government rewired negative gearing. Buy an established property after 7:30 p.m. on the 12th of May 2026, and you can still negatively gear it exactly like before, for now. But from the 1st of July 2027, any rental losses on that property can only be offset against rental income or a future capital gain, not against your salary anymore. Buy a brand new build instead, and none of that applies. New builds keep the old rules indefinitely. On top of that, the 50% capital gains tax discount is being replaced too, for gains that build up after the 1st of July 2027, swapped out for an inflation-adjusted cost base, plus a minimum 30% tax on the gain. And here's the twist inside the twist. That change applies to shares as well as property. It's not a property-only hit. So if you're buying an established investment property today, the classic negative gearing pitch has roughly a 12-month shelf life before it gets quarantined. Round 3. Genuinely split, but with an asterisk nobody's mentioned to you yet. Round 4. Diversification. And this one's simple maths dressed up as a big word. Put your 100 grand into an ASX 200 index fund, something like A200 or VAS or IOZ, and you now own a slice of roughly 200 different companies. Banks, miners, healthcare, retail, the lot. If one company has a shocker, it's a rounding error in your portfolio. Put that same 100 grand down as a deposit on a property, and you are now 100% concentrated in one dwelling, in one suburb, with one tenant. Or worse, no tenant at all for a stretch. One bad renter who trashes the place, one flood risk you didn't know about, one suburb that gets flooded with new apartment supply and tanks the rent you can charge. Any one of those can wipe out a year's income in a single event. Shares still carry full market risk, don't get me wrong. If the whole market drops, your 200 companies drop with it. But at least you're not betting the farm on one postcode and one set of keys. Round 4. Shares on pure risk spreading logic. Round 5. The long game. 30 years. No shortcuts. Vanguard's own 30-year index chart puts Australian shares somewhere between 9.2 and 9.8% a year, depending on exactly which 30-year window you measure. Property over comparable 30-year stretches has delivered somewhere between 5.4 and 6.8% a year in capital growth alone, depending on which data set you're looking at. On the surface, shares are clearly ahead, but property gets to add its rental yield on top, call it 3.5%, and then multiply the whole lot by that leverage advantage from round 1. Do that math properly, and total leveraged returns on property for the same 100 grand deposit can get very close to unleveraged share returns in raw dollar terms. Sometimes it even edges ahead, but leverage is a two-way blade. It doesn't just amplify your gains, it amplifies your losses just as violently. We saw that in June this year, when Sydney values dropped 1.2% in a single month, and Melbourne dropped 1.0%. If you're leveraged 5-1 and the market drops, your losses are leveraged 5-1 too. So here's where round 5 lands. On paper, over 30 years, it's genuinely a dead heat. Shares probably nose ahead unleveraged, property can match or beat that once you factor in the bank's money doing some of the lifting. Neither side gets to plant a flag and call it settled. Which brings us to the part of this video that actually decides the fight. And it's got nothing to do with spreadsheets. Here's the bit nobody tells you, and it's the reason property keeps winning arguments at Australian dinner tables, even when the math says otherwise. In June this year, Australia's national home value index dropped 0.4%. That's the steepest monthly fall in 3.5 years. And you know what nobody did? Nobody panic sold their house from their phone at 2 in the morning. Nobody could. It takes weeks to list, weeks to sell, an agent, paperwork, the whole circus. Now, rewind to February and March 2020. The ASX 200 fell roughly 37% in about 23 trading days. 23 days, and a huge number of everyday Australians hit sell right near the bottom, locking in losses they never needed to take, because the app made it that easy to panic. Property's real superpower was never leverage, and it was never tax. It's that it's too slow and too annoying to sell in a panic. That single behavioral trait can matter more to your actual wealth than any number in this entire video. So here's the one concrete thing to actually do with all this. Head to the Money Smart Investment Calculator. It's free, it's run by the government, and it's at moneysmart.gov.au. Plug in both scenarios using your actual income, not a guess. That 47% tax bracket and the new negative gearing timeline hit completely differently depending on whether you're earning 80 grand or 180 grand, and whether you'd be buying new or established. Run your own numbers before you run your mouth at Christmas lunch. So, recap. Shares win on paper, property wins on behavior, and the 2026 budget just quietly rewired who gets the tax edge at all. Next time, we're tackling the number that actually decides if you're rich in this country. The real income cutoffs for the top 10%, the top 5%, and the top 1% of Australian earners, and they might not be what you think. Smash that subscribe button so you don't miss it.